So we are back, and we are back in Rackspace in our control panel, and we're looking at our activated server. So you can see here that our server status is indeed active, and we have all of our server details in place. Now, if we scroll down here, also you can see our network configuration is in place. We have two IP addresses here. The first IP address is our public IP address, IPv4, and they also give us an IPv6, which we're not going to use yet, but this is the future right here because we're running out of IPv4 addresses. So this is how we're going to get to our server from the outside world. This is also, if we set up DNS on this, using the domain name system, this is what our name will get translated into when it hits the DNS servers. Now below that is another IP address that's labeled here as ServiceNet for Rackspace DFW. And this is not a publicly accessible internet. This is an IP address. This is an internal IP address for this particular server, which means that if I had a bunch of servers all running in the Dallas-Fort Worth data center, I could have them all talk together internally via these IP addresses. So, for instance, if I had a web server and a database server, I could connect them via these two IP addresses without ever exposing them to the outside world via this guy. So that's a nice little feature, and most good cloud hosting will utilize some sort of internal IP address or internal network that you can use for your servers. So more on that later. Getting down a little bit further, you can see we have an image section here. This is where we would go to create a new image from our server. And we will get into this maybe next week. I think we'll talk about creating images. You probably won't need to do that this week. Monitoring checks are, you can just get a better idea of uptime availability. It explains that a little bit down here. And also storage volumes. So these are larger block storage volumes, essentially, that you can connect to your server to increase the storage on that particular server. Because you'll notice that we only have 20 gigabytes of disk space on this particular server. If we need more than that, we may have to attach a server volume, and we can do this without having to pay for large increases in RAM, which typically come as your disk size increases. So this doesn't really do us much good. This is just telling us about the server, but we actually have to get in there and start messing around with it. So if you look up here, you'll see this SSH command, and it should look a little familiar because we talked about that in earlier lessons, or excuse me, in earlier videos this week. And SSH is how we basically change our terminal to be the terminal of the server we want to manage. So I'm going to actually go ahead and copy this into my clipboard. Ooh, actually, I'm not going to copy that quite yet. Let me quickly paste a text file. Let's see here, just so I don't forget the password. There we go. Okay, so that's our password just to get into that server so I remember. All right, so now let's copy our SSH command, and let's go ahead and open up our terminal. So this is just the terminal on I'm doing this lesson on an iMac right now. So this is just the default way the terminal looks when I open it up. Now I've made it full screen, and I've also increased the font size a little bit, but you should see a very similar screen to this. And a couple things I want to point out here. So first of all, the blinking cursor, and like this is where we type, just like normal here. Up here, this just gives us the last login to the terminal. We can type clear to get rid of that if you don't want to see that anymore. So what this text here is comprised of are a few different things. Everything before the little tilde here, that is the name of my computer. So this computer's name happens to be LoudPixels iMac. So this is my company iMac computer. And that's the name of the computer, so that's what the terminal puts there. The next part is this little tilde right here. And what this says is that we are located in our home directory. So the tilde always stands for home directory. So if you went cd tilde, you would be back in the same place. You basically change directories into the home. This is the same thing as saying cd users loudpixel. It's the same thing as saying that. So these two are the same thing. This is obviously shorter and less to type than that. So finally, this gives us the name of our user right here. So we have computer name, location, and username all right here. So from this, we can start messing around with our server. So we're going to go through some of the commands and how to interact with the server once we get in there. I could show you on the local machine, but it's a lot easier to do it on the server. So let's paste our SSH command in. So yours is going to be different. Yours should be the same up until about this point, and then your IP address is going to be different. Obviously, we both can't have the same IP address. So make sure yours is not this, because you won't be able to log into this guy. So let's hit enter and see what happens. First thing that comes up, the authenticity of the host 198.61.2222.89 can't be established. RSA key fingerprint, blah, 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 blah. Are you sure you want to continue connecting? Yes, I am sure I want to continue connecting. This is basically just saying, hey, I've never connected to this host before. Are you sure this is something you want to do? I just created the server, so I know it's safe. We're going to go ahead and click yes. Okay. So it's added 190. It's added that IP address to the list of known hosts, so we won't get that warning anymore. And now I need to go pull up my password here to log into this server and paste that in. And I've just pasted it. It's not going to show anything. If you type something here, it's not going to show anything. The passwords are obfuscated in Unix and Linux, so you're just going to have to do it by visually looking at the keys or relying on your mad typing skills. Okay, so that logged us in, and you can tell that we've been logged in because if you look down here at our terminal, you can see that a couple different things have changed. So first of all, the format is a little different. We have the username, root, at the name of the server, followed by the location on the server, followed by the #. So we know we can start, that's where we can start typing. And you also know we're on the server. So obviously this command is different. This prompt is different. But you can also see up here that it gives us a little bit of system information for us to go by. You can see we've used 5% of our 20 gigs and 8% of our memory, and there's currently 60 processes running, things like that. So not terribly important right now, but it is nice to know. And also, in case you forgot, it lists our IP addresses up here as well. So we can issue the clear command to get rid of all that scruff on the screen. And now it's just us and the server. So at this point, you should have created a server, and you should have SSH'd in as the root user, which is the only user currently on the system. And root users are kind of the super user of the server. They can do anything. A root user can even delete itself if it wants to. You could issue a command that would essentially self-destruct the server. So the root user is very, very powerful and very, very dangerous. So for the hello world example, we are going to be using the root user. We're not going to create new users yet because that's just going to confuse you guys. For the purpose of moving forward, though, you typically never, ever, ever, ever want to run a production web server from the root user. The problem being, if the server gets compromised and your hacker gets access to the root level of the server, they can basically destroy it. They can do anything they want. If we had a less privileged user running the web server, the hackers would be limited in scope on what they can do unless they gain root access. So it's not necessarily that simple, but as a rule of thumb, if you're going to be keeping a web server on the internet for longer than a week, you should probably consider creating new users. And we're going to talk about creating new users next week. So this will be the first and last time we only use the root user for our examples. So We're gonna stop this video. We're gonna move on to the next one. I'll give you guys a quick break. Make sure you're at this point where you've created your server on Rackspace and you've logged into the server via SSH. If you're on Windows, none of this stuff will look familiar. This is all Mac and Unix-based stuff. If you're on Windows, you're going to need to download the PuTTY application, and I've provided a link to that below. And you're going to need to follow the instructions on PuTTY for logging into servers remotely. With PuTTY, you won't have to type SSH root @ you'll basically just be filling out that information in a form and connecting almost like an FTP server. But once you connect, you should see a very similar prompt to what we have now, and you should also be able to run all the commands that we run in the next example. So make sure you get to this point and stay tuned for the next video.